Hey everybody, Darren from the White Hatter, and welcome to today's product review on the Tanoshi Scholar computer for kids. Let's get after it. Before we start this review, I think it's important that our followers know that we were not financially compensated in any way by Tanoshi. All they did was they sent us one of their Tanoshi Scholars for the review. So again, we are not compensated, we're not paid for this review whatsoever. And this is important for us because we want to be objective in what it is that we're doing. And we've done this on several other products because parents turn to us for guidance. It's not uncommon. We've got tens of thousands of parents that follow us in our social media feed, and it's very common that they'll ask us our thoughts on specific social media sites, apps, hardware, software that is out there to help them keep the internet world safer for their kids. In the past, we've done reviews on the Gryphon router, which we think is the best router on the market for parents to help keeping their kids safer in the online world. And we also did a product review on the Pinwheel phone, which we think is the best phone for preteens and younger kids as their first phone as well. And in those cases, we weren't paid at all or any way subsidized by the vendors of choice that we were looking at the time. Recently, we've been having parents connecting with us, asking us about iPads and Chromebooks, and are they appropriate for those who are younger? And when we say younger, between grades K to 6. And don't get us wrong, we think the iPad and Chromebooks are pretty cool products, but you know what? They were designed specifically for adults. They were never designed for kids, right? So we decided, let's do our research. Let's see if there's anything out there that has been designed specifically for kids. And that's where we came across the Tanoshi Scholar. And full disclosure, we became aware of Tanoshi a couple of years ago on a Shark Tank episode on TV, where the CEO of the company was pitching their first version of the Tanoshi, looking for funding from the sharks. And at that time when we watched it on Shark Tank a couple of years ago, it sparked my interest because it was something different, something unique. But because it was a startup, I really didn't pay any more attention to it until recently when we started to do our research. And as we started to do our research, we found that Tanoshi created a version 2 that they called the Tanoshi Scholar, and which is specifically designed for youth between grades K to 6. And as we were reading the online reviews, a lot of them were pretty good, but we're also very cautious when we read online reviews because sometimes those reviews are actually created by vendors who create fake accounts to talk up their product. So one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to get our hands on the product so that we can test and evaluate it, so that we can say that we looked at it and here's what we recommend, here's what we like, here's what we don't like. So we connected with Tanoshi and the CEO, and we spoke to him, and we did it via email. We just sent him a blind email saying, hey, listen, this is who we are and this is what we do. And lo and behold, he returned an email back to us. And so we connected over the phone. And after going back and forth a little bit and the CEO doing his due diligence on us as a company to make sure that we were who we said we were and we weren't trying to pull the wool over his eyes, he agreed to send us the Tanoshi Scholar for testing and evaluation. Here it is right here. And right away, I want to share with you how impressed we were with the packaging of the product, because we find that a lot of things that are marketed to kids and youth, the packaging is very toy-like, right? Like the Tanoshi is not a toy. It is a digital hybrid computer. That's what it is, right? But the packaging of itself reminded me very much like Apple packaging, right? Like it was very secure, very hefty. I mean, this thing, like it has almost like every time it's like a vacuum seal, the way that it has been designed to do what it is it does, right? And so inside the packaging, it was pretty simple, right? It came with the quick starter guide that it has for parents. And I want to give a big tip of our hat to Tanoshi because their parents guide, their startup guide to get this thing going, it was like so simple to follow, right? To get this thing going, up and going by any parent. Even if you're a parent who is not very tech savvy, this thing kind of walks you through in a very simplistic way on how to get the unit up and going. It came with other administrative type papers that usually comes with products like this as well. And then it came with the Tanoshi. So I'm just going to pull this out of the box. Here it is right here. And then in the bottom of the box, came the power cord that comes with the Tanoshi. So I'm just going to take the box for now, and I'm just going to move this over here, and I'm just going to put the wires there. But there it is. There it is. That is the Tanoshi. It's kind of interesting. It's about the same size. So it's about 10 by 5 inches by about 7 inches. And it's less than an inch thick, right? So it's less than an inch thick. So in fact, it reminds me a lot. It's about the same size as my iPad that I'm using right now, where it's got my speaker notes, things that I'm talking about in today's presentation. So it's pretty cool, and it's pretty hefty. And the reason it's hefty is because of it's being armorized, right? One of the things that Tanoshi learned in their first generation that wasn't very ruggedized is that kids treat products like this harshly, like they have a tendency to drop things and spill things on it. So their version 2, they ruggedized it, and that's one of the things that they promote, is that this product was designed for kids specifically between grades K to 5, but they built it in such a way that it would withstand the abuse that kids that age will deal to devices such as this. Now, so this is what it looks like coming out of the box, and when you open it, it looks and feels just like a laptop, right? And it's really cool. It comes with the ability to set up screen protectors. You can lock down the screen as well, but it looks and feels just like a laptop. That's what it is. You got your keyboard. The keyboard is a smaller keyboard, again, because kids in grades K to 7, they don't have the big meaty hands like I do. They're smaller hands, so it works perfectly for them. But even with my big adult hands, this keyboard feels just fine in the hands, as well as the tracking pad on it. It comes with a 10.1 inch high definition touchscreen. And the touchscreen is extremely sensitive. Like it's really kind of cool how responsive the touchscreen is to it. And it comes with the on-off buttons, and it comes on the side with all the ports that is also protected so that if water gets in there, it's not going to cause any damage. To set the unit up was very simple to do. You just plug in the power cord, you hook it up. They recommend that you pre-charge it for 4 to 5 hours before downloading the software. But once you've charged it, you plug it in, all you need is a Wi-Fi connection. That's all you need. It doesn't use data, it doesn't use cellular, it's all done by Wi-Fi. So as long as you have Wi-Fi in the home, with a couple of pushes of the button following the quick startup guide that they give to you to follow, again, very simple, and a big tip of our hat to Tanoshi for this quick parent starter guide. Once you connect to the internet, it takes you about 15 minutes for the program for it to be downloaded into the Tanoshi computer. The operating system that the Tanoshi uses is not it's not MS, it's not Mac or iOS. Their operating system is actually an Android operating system. They use Android 10, or what's known as Android Q. So basically, it uses the same operating software as a modern Android phone. So for those of you who have Android phones, you'll be very familiar with how to use this, because that's what it's based upon. Now, again, it's not as if your kids can connect. Because it uses an Android platform doesn't mean that they use data to connect to the internet, because you can't use data on this. The only way they're going to connect is via Wi-Fi. So they use the Android 10 platform. Again, it's very responsive. Playing with it, it worked just fine. And the other really cool thing is that it comes preloaded with over 30 different programs and apps that have basically been curated that they believe would be appropriate for kids to use. And a lot of it is Google-based, which, for some parents is a little concerning because Google collects everything, right? And we'll talk about how to minimize that a little bit later. But the other thing it has is it comes prepackaged with a variety of different apps that teach kids how to code, which is really cool. I mean, when they designed this thing, they wanted to design it so that the kids weren't just going to use it for consumption, right? Where they were just going online and just, surfing aimlessly and treating it like bubble gum for their brain. They wanted to create a product that also gave kids the ability to become creators and producers and teach them things like learning how to use code. Now, the other really cool thing about the Tanoshi is that, again, it was designed for parents in mind, but it's what we call a hybrid. And what do I mean by that? Well, not only is it a laptop, but check this out. It disconnects so that the child can actually use it as a tablet, so very much like an iPad, but it's an Android tablet. and it works via touch. So it's really cool that way, and that's why we call it a hybrid. Not only is it a tablet, but it also is a laptop. And what we really like about the design is, for those of you who have ever had a tablet or an iPad and you want to get an external Bluetooth keypad, a lot of you know a lot of those keypads are pretty flimsy, and when you connect your iPad or your tablet to it, it's just by magnets, so it doesn't hold on very securely. Well, this thing, holy crow, it's got 2 connector points, so it's on there very secure, so it's not as if it's going to fall off. The other thing we really like about the Tanoshi, and I've already mentioned this, is how it's being ruggedized. They basically armored it out because they want to be able to protect it from the abuse that kids will apply to these devices, right? So it comes with protective armor on the exterior. And then on the screen, there's also a built-in screen protector that they put into there to help ruggedize the screen and offer a little bit of what they call blue light protection from the blue light that comes from these devices. So pretty cool. But you know what? They can say this. Like, we've had a ton of companies say that they've ruggedized things, they've made it tougher and that kind of stuff. But when you actually test it, it's not as ruggedized as they say it is. And so one of the things that we like to do here at the White Hatter is to test the vendor. You know, if the vendor is saying it's ruggedized, it helps protect against spillage and drops, well, let's test it and let's see what it does, right? So a couple of things to note with regards to the Tanoshi. It takes about 4 to 5 hours for it to fully charge. And once it's fully charged, it averages about 6 hours of battery life, right? So if you disconnect it from a power source, the kids can be on it for about 6 hours. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but on average in our testing it was around 6 hours. But having said that, if they have the device plugged in, then you have power 24/7, right? It's not a big deal. But if they're traveling with it, like in a car or whatever it is they're doing, they've got about 6 hours of battery life. The other thing that it comes installed with, because it uses Android and Google, it comes pre-packaged. And when I say pre-packaged, you have to download, and they show you how to do that. You can download the Google Family Parent link right onto the device. And for those of you that are familiar with the Google Family Parent link, it's basically Google's suite that applies parental filters and monitors into devices, right? Like the Android platform, the Chrome platform. And I'll be very honest with you, it's a pretty good product, but it's not as robust as we would like it to be. So this is because they use the Android operating system platform. What we did was we didn't want to use the Google Family Protection that they have in here. We decided to download a third-party product called Boomerang. And Boomerang is a Vancouver-based company, and we've tested a lot of software products designed for Android devices, and we believe, based upon our testing and evaluation, that Boomerang is the best on the market to put on there. So we actually downloaded Boomerang onto the Tanoshi Scholar, and we could do it flawlessly. No problems whatsoever, right out of the Google Store. And once we downloaded it onto the Tanoshi, it became our child's primary browser, filter, and monitor. And it can all be done from the parent's cell phone. It is so simple. Boomerang is so simple to set up where you can, if you don't want your child using the Google search engine on the Tanoshi with a push of a button, boof, they can't do it, right? And what's cool about Boomerang is it comes with its own browser, which is called the Spin browser. And that comes free with the actual Boomerang program. And by the way, to download Boomerang on the Tanoshi, a 1 year, $16. Not per month. That's for the entire year, right? Which is extremely reasonable. So with the parent filtering and monitoring, you also get the Spin browser. And the Spin browser becomes your primary browser that your child will use to search things online, whatever it is they're searching. And the Spin browser helps to minimize porn, nudity, language, violence, hate crime. It does a really good job about filtering that stuff out before your kids can even search it online. Now, is there any product on the market that is 100% effective? No. But Boomerang does a really good job about minimizing some of those issues. So, one of the things that we would encourage parents to do is that if you do decide to go with the Tanoshi Scholar, download Boomerang as your primary parent filter and monitor onto the computer, and that's what we want you to use. Now, the next thing we did is we decided, let's test this thing. Let's put it to its paces with respect to the ruggedization, because Tanoshi advertises that the ruggedization helps protect it from accidental drops or spillage, right? So we decided, let's do some drop tests on this thing. And trust me, I'm a little hesitant to do that with any kind of electronic device, right? But they advertise it as being ruggedized, so let's test it. Let's see if it does what it says it does. So we did a drop test, and we dropped this test from about 30 inches in height. And the reason we did 30 inches, because that's the height of most desks, most tables that a lot of the kids will sit. And that's the height, like if your kid is traveling with this thing closed, like a laptop, or even as the tablet, if they accidentally drop it, it's usually from about 30 inches. So when we dropped the Tanoshi, we dropped it in the close mode, and we dropped it two different ways. We dropped it flat, and then we dropped it on the angle so that it would hit the ground on the sides, right? Because when a kid drops a device, who knows how it's going to hit the ground? It could hit flat, it could hit on an angle, you just don't know. So we decided to do drops both flat and on an angle. And there were 3 different surfaces that we did the drop test on. We did it on a carpeted floor, we did it on a hardwood floor, and then our last test, which was the scariest for us, was dropping it onto asphalt. Because again, if your child is traveling to or from school with this thing and they accidentally drop it, it's probably going to be on asphalt or concrete, something really hard, right? So we decided to do tests of all of them. So when we drop tested it onto a carpeted floor, no problems whatsoever. We saw no damage after we dropped it. After each drop, we opened it up, we turned it on, we played with it to make sure it was working just fine. No problems whatsoever, no damage to the product whatsoever on a carpeted floor. We then dropped it onto hardwood floors, because some homes have hardwood floors, right? So we dropped it onto a hardwood floor, flat and on an angle. And again, we saw no damage, whatsoever, to the product, but you could definitely hear the thud when it hit the hardwood floors. But after each drop on the hardwood floor, we would open it up, turn it on, and we would use it in all kinds of variety of different ways, and it worked flawlessly. Like, there were no issues whatsoever. And then our third test was onto asphalt, right? And this was the scariest for us, right? So again, we dropped it onto asphalt, both flat and on an angle, just to see what happened. And when we dropped it on asphalt, as soon as it hit the asphalt on all the drops, the actual tablet separated from the keyboard on all of our drops. Now, I don't think they did this by design. I think it's just something that happened, but it kind of reminded me, for those of you that follow NASCAR or Formula One racing, you know that a lot of the race cars are designed so that if there's an accidental impact against a hard surface, the body of those cars are designed to absorb impact and crush, right? To protect the driver in the middle. I actually think, by complete accident, not by design, by dropping and hitting a hard surface like asphalt, when the tablet actually separated from the keyboard, it kind of absorbs some of the energy, which kind of diminishes maybe some of the negative effects of impacting a hard surface. Again, that's anecdotal in nature, but I think that's probably what happened. But even after separation, when I played with the tablet, it worked just fine, and it was still reconnecting to the keyboard, no problems whatsoever. We did see some damage, right? We didn't see any damage when we dropped it flat, but when we dropped it on the angle, there was definitely some denting and marking onto the corners of the Tanoshi when we dropped it. And the other thing that we noticed on the asphalt is that we saw that there was actually a small hairline fracture on the screen. Now, not on the screen itself, but on the protective screen. Because if you remember, the Tanoshi comes with a screen protector built right into it. So the screen protector cracked, right? But the actual screen underneath it didn't. So although it cracked, it did what it was supposed to do, right? That's why we have screen protectors on devices like that. And you know what? It's easy enough just to peel this thing away and get a new screen protector for a couple bucks and put it back on there. But even with the crack on the screen, it really didn't interfere. You couldn't really see it. The only reason we could see it is because once we started to play with it, we accidentally turned it and the sunlight just caught, you could just see a slight crack, right? It picked up, it reflected the light. But even with that, it didn't damage the screen behind it, so it did its job. So from a drop test perspective, pretty ruggedized, right? It did what it said it did to help minimize risk. Again, if the kids are whipping it at the ground or dropping it from 100 feet or something like that, are you going to get the same protection? Probably not. But from everyday accidental drops from tables, desks, or if they're holding it in their hand, they drop it accidentally, it does a pretty good job at protecting the unit. Like, I would never try to do the same thing with an iPad by itself unless it was in an OtterBox to protect it or with a Chromebook, but pretty ruggedized. The next test we did was a water test, right? Because they said that this thing is also liquid repellent, right? It's pretty tough against liquid. So what we decided to do, and you know it, right? Like kids love to have drinks with them, and you just know that if they have a drink with them, it's gonna spill, right? These things are like magnets to liquid, right? So what we decided to do is we took a fairly large cup of water, glass of water, and we took it and we just dropped it on all of it on the, and we left it there for 2 minutes, right? Because we thought, okay, you know, how long do we want to leave it on there? Well, let's think about this. If the child drops liquid on there, by the time they notify the parent or do it themselves, it's probably going to be about 1.5 to 2 minutes for them to clean it up. So that's what we did, was we poured the water on the Tanoshi, all over the Tanoshi, and we left it there for 2 minutes, and then we went out and we dried it off with a cloth, and then we opened it up, started it up. We actually dropped it when it was open as well, and it was working just fine. We had no problems whatsoever with the liquid interfering with the Tanoshi in any way. What was interesting, however, I'm just going to do the separation here. What we found, however, is when liquid gets into the keyboard itself, the keyboard doesn't have a liquid membrane behind the keys. So when the liquid was dropped, the liquid actually got into the keyboard. Like you can see, this is about 1/4 of an inch thick. So the liquid actually went in between the keys and inside of the keyboard, so that when we did this, you could actually see the water draining out of the keyboard. Which was concerning to us, and we thought, you know, is that going to affect it? But, you know, we took it and we kind of used centrifugal force to wave the water out, and then we just left it out in the sun, shine to air dry for about 5 to 10 minutes. And we restarted it up. Let me just put this thing back together again. We restarted it, and guess what? It worked just fine. We had no issues whatsoever. It was working just fine. Now, the question we do have that we couldn't test is we used water. But what if it was pop or juice? Because most of us know that once you wipe up pop or juice or let it air dry, it leaves a sticky like residue behind. And so, you know, if pop or juice gets in behind those keys, could it interfere with the operation of those keys? It could, but again, we couldn't test that. But I think from a liquid standpoint, again, did we see any major issues with the keyboard or the tablet itself? No, we didn't whatsoever. It still worked just fine. So again, if your kid accidentally drops a glass of water or something on there, or they actually drop it in the sink, the toilet, or whatever, for whatever reason, it's pretty robust. It kind of does what it says it does. So it actually passed what we thought was a good liquid test on the device itself. So the next thing that we looked at, so pretty ruggedized, right? It kind of does, we would agree it does exactly what the vendor or the manufacturer says it does, right? From a ruggedization and from protecting against liquids and drops in most situations, right? But the next thing we looked at was price point, right? Like what's the cost of this compared to an iPad or a Chromebook? So presently, you can't purchase the Tanoshi Scholar in any stores in Canada. However, you can have it shipped from the United States into Canada. And so to ship it from the United States to your door here in Canada is going to cost you about $300 plus tax to get it to you. So when you compare that to a regular iPad, which is about $400, I think, well, let me look at it. It's $429 for your basic iPad. It's cheaper than an iPad for sure. And when you can get Chromebooks right now for like $150, right? They're pretty cheap. But the difference between a Chromebook and the iPad is that they're not ruggedized. Number one, right? I wouldn't even attempt to do the drop test with a Chromebook unless we got armor for it, or even an iPad. I wouldn't attempt to do the drop test that we did unless it was in an OtterBox. And then all of a sudden, you know, if all of a sudden you're trying to armor the iPad and the Chromebook, you're adding costs into that, right? So now all of a sudden, yeah, you can pick up a Chromebook for $150, but after you ruggedize it and get some other things, it's going to be about the same cost as the Tanoshi, in our opinion. But again, the Chromebook was designed for adults, whereas the Tanoshi was designed for kids between K to 6. Which again is important, because another mistake a lot of people will do is they want to compare the Tanoshi with the iPad, saying, you know, the iPad is way better. Well, hold on a second here. The iPad was designed for adults. That's what it was designed for. The Tanoshi was designed for kids. It does the same thing, maybe not as robust or as quick as the iPad does, but it was designed for kids, and it's designed to be ruggedized against kids. So, you know, comparing this against an iPad or a Chromebook really isn't fair to a degree. But however, from an operation standpoint, it holds up pretty good to the iPad and the Chromebook as well. So from a price point, we think it's extremely reasonable. You're not paying huge bucks to get a device that your child is likely going to break or damage, right? Wherein this thing is ruggedized coming right out of the box, where an iPad or Chromebook isn't. You have to pay extra money to do that, to get those products ruggedized. So from a cost-saving standpoint, pretty reasonable in our opinion. Other features about the Tanoshi that we kind of liked as well was that it's got a built-in mouse pad. It's got a camera both in the front and in, so this is the front camera, which is right there, and we got a rear-facing camera. But what's really cool about the rear-facing camera, I'm going to turn this up so you guys can see this, is if, it's going to be hard to see, but if they've actually got a screen or a camera protector where you close it, it's a privacy screen, and it's built right in to the computer. So after our testing and evaluation review, here's what we really like about the Tanoshi Scholar. Price point. It's under $400 Canadian, so it's extremely reasonable, especially when you compare it against the costs to an iPad or even a Chromebook later on that you have to fully ruggedize and pay aftermarket third-party products to give the same protection as the Tanoshi. The Tanoshi was also built specifically for preteens and younger teens in mind, right? That's how it was built. The whole platform was built on that premise. We love the ruggedization that comes right out of the box on this thing, both the external and the screen protection to help protect it against drops and against liquid spillage. Love that right out of the box. The high definition screen, it's a touch screen, and it's extremely interactive, no lag whatsoever. Really love that. We love the fact that there was 30 pre-installed programs and apps on the device, especially programs that taught kids how to code and mathematics. Again, the whole thought process behind the design of this product was to create a product that not only gave kids the ability to surf online, but also to teach them how to be creators and producers. Just love that function. We like the fact that they have both a front and rear facing camera, and we love that the rear facing camera that looks at the young person has a privacy slide on there so that they can engage it so nobody can see what it is they're doing. We love the fact that it can actually be packaged up much like a laptop, where a child can take it to or from school, to or from a friend's place, whoever they're going to use it. We really like that as a function as well. We also like the fact that it can be integrated with Zoom. So if kids are doing at-home learning because of what's going on with COVID, Zoom integrates very effectively with the platform. It also integrates very well with Google Classrooms, right? Because a lot of schools and classrooms are now using Google Classroom. And so because of that, it works extremely well there as well. The other thing that we really liked, it's a hybrid. Not only is it a laptop, but again, it's also a tablet where you can disconnect, which kids are going to love. I guarantee you that, right? It also allows you to download the parent. Once you put Boomerang on there and set up proper parental permissions, your child won't be able to download anything onto the Tanoshi without your permission, but you as a parent can still download any other apps on the Google Play Store onto the Tanoshi that you think would be reasonable based upon your child's digital maturity as they get older. Very cool function. And we also like the fact that the docking points on this are extremely secure. Like this, when you compare this to other wireless systems like iPad keyboards or other tablet keyboards, this is much more secure, much more stable. So those are things that we really liked about the Tanoshi Scholar. Having said that, we also found some things that we didn't like. The dust cover on the device that protects the ports that you can plug into, because it's waterproofed, it can sometimes be hard for little hands to open it up to access the point where you have to plug in power. Sometimes we had challenges doing that. The on-off button at the top here sometimes can be a little challenging to get the computer to turn on and off. Sometimes we found that the mouse pad was a little oversensitive in the way that it moved. There's no doubt that the startup or boot up of the Tanoshi compared to the iPad or the Chromebook is much, much slower. But again, don't forget what this thing was designed for, right? Like it wasn't designed for adults, it's designed for kids. But once this thing booted up and was good to go, man, the reactivity of it, the searchability was similar to what we found on the iPad or the Chromebook. we really didn't like the Google Family Parental Controlling. Again, Google does a good job with it, don't get us wrong, but it's not as robust as we would like it to be or as easy to use as we like it to be. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend that parents install the Boomerang app on the Tanoshi, which is really easy to do. Again, only $16 a year to do that. And it's full of way more robust and effective parenting filtering and monitoring that the parent can control from their phone, and that's what we would recommend. And the other downside was the battery life. Like, the battery life on this is about 6 hours, and we did several tests, right? So again, it averaged 6 hours, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending upon how many things are open, what the child is doing, but on average about 6 hours. And so it's less than an iPad for sure, and less than a Chromebook, no doubt about it, but it's still good 6 hours. So if your child is using this in the car while you're traveling on holidays, they still have 6 hours to do some stuff, which is really cool. And the other downside is it took about 4 to 5 hours to fully recharge the battery, which is far greater than what you see on an iPad or a Chromebook. Now, having said that, when we brought these challenges to the attention of the vendor, the CEO of Tanoshi, one of the things that he shared with us is that their Generation 3 Scholar that's coming out hopefully in January next year, it overcomes all these issues, is what they shared with us. Now, and we said, well, okay, well, that's good, but I can't really say that at this point in time until I get version 3 and I can test and evaluate it and make sure it does exactly what you said it was going to do to fix some of those challenges. But even with those challenges that we've identified, we think the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. And again, when you think about why this thing was designed and who it was designed for, those challenges aren't really big deals to kids that are in grades K to grade 6. Yeah, it may be a big deal to us older adults or older teens, right? Who like the speed and the functionality of an iPad or a Chromebook or a laptop, like a MacBook or something like that. But really, to kids in grades K to 6, that's not really a big deal. So again, we think that the positives, the things that we liked, definitely outweigh some of the identified challenges or negatives. But we also thought it was important that we mentioned some of those negatives as well. So concluding this review, overall, we actually like this device. We think as a first device, as a hybrid laptop tablet built into one, they've done a pretty good job about designing a product that is specifically for young kids, again, between grades K to 6, that that is built from the ground up, ruggedized, built with operating system and apps and software that parents can curate. So if you combine the Tanoshi, and at a price point at $300, pretty reasonable as well, right? So if you can combine the Tanoshi as their first hybrid laptop, right? Think of it like a laptop with training wheels. If you combine this with accessing the internet through a Gryphon router that we talk about in another video review, and please check it out, and we'll probably add that into the notes of this YouTube as well, and then also combine it with the Boomerang app that we'll put into the notes here in the video review as well, and you layer your protection. If you do that and then you combine it with parental participation and parental communication, because again, like we say, too many parents put too much belief and effort in that hardware and software is going to keep their kids safe online. That's not necessarily so. It can keep them safer depending upon what the product is. But what all the research shows us is that when it comes to keeping our kids safe online, it's all about parental participation with our kids, parental communication with our kids, and then parental oversight using hardware and software where appropriate and reasonable to do so. And we actually think that the Tanoshi Scholar computer goes a long way. So from a first computer standpoint for young kids, we actually think that this is a good option and maybe something you as parents should be considering.